Hey guys, this is Tauna. Today we are talking about the Doctor Who set. We're going to be looking at 10 different cards that are all below $1 that I'm actually surprised aren't used within more decks. They are, to me at least, relatively fun cards, relatively powerful, some of them, that are going to potentially be your new favorite cards. I don't know, maybe you guys will really agree with me or maybe you won't. That's what I would love to hear, your opinions on the cards that I am about to talk about. Before we get into it though, make sure you guys like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Please the algorithm, it helps us so much here. So the first one here we're talking about is Riversongs Diary. So this card here is whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell card from their hand, exile it instead of putting it into a graveyard as it resolves. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there is 4 or more cards exiled with Riversongs Diary, choose one of them at random. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. So essentially, as long as people are playing instants and sorceries, which happens relatively often, these cards are all going to go into a big pile that you're going to be able to get. Then you're going to shuffle through that at the start of your upkeep as long as there's 4 or more cards in there and get to play one of them randomly. Now keep in mind that it doesn't say that it stays exiled after you play it, so assumedly it will go back into the graveyard of the person who originally owned it and then they'll have it back there. But you get to play this without paying its mana cost. To me, this is a very, very interesting and quite strong card. I actually can't see the top commander that I love it for here. No, where is he? Here. Don Andreas. I'm running this in my Don Andreas deck. This is essentially at the start of upkeep, create 2 treasures and get to cast something for free. It works incredibly well in any kind of, exile themed deck because you're going to be playing cards from exile. You're going to be able to, just get a whole bunch of value from casting these free spells, but it also works very well in any kind of spell slinger decks, right? Like, it's your cards will get exiled, but also other people's cards. So you get to potentially, do some spell slinging stuff there and, hey, this get exiled, but then I get to play it randomly later on, especially with someone like Riku who already is playing modal spells. So like, you exile a modal spell, it's in there, you pull it up randomly, you get to choose one of the modes that's going to suit you at the time rather than kind of being locked into playing something you potentially don't exactly want to play at the time. Any kind of spell slinger deck I think could potentially make use of this. It's not going to be ideal in some of them, specifically ones that are going to be playing around having cards in your graveyard, but overall I think that it is a relatively nice card for a lot of spell slinger decks and a lot of exile decks, and definitely like a Don Andreas kind of theft deck. All right, the next one here is Reverse the Polarity. So this is a very interesting modal spell because of just how kind of versatile it is. So the first up here is, it counter all other spells. So you can play this on other people's spells, especially if you've got someone like storming off or something like that. Counter all of their spells and boom, it's done. I've kind of, talked a little bit with my friend about it, and while it is very similar to kind of Flusterstorm, it's not quite as strong. Definitely for a casual deck, this will be very useful, especially if you've got people who are going to be playing, lots of different spells and going high in the stack kind of thing. You've got that option there, but Flusterstorm's going to be stronger in most circumstances, but this is like, a less than $1 card compared to that. And that's also not included the fact that it's got other modes, right? Like you can switch each creature's power and toughness until end of turn. That could potentially wipe out, people's minions if they've got zero power minions or something. You can do a whole bunch of great stuff to kind of trick people around with that. You play it on someone else's turn as they're going to attack someone, and boom, now all their stuff's going to die. Or, there's also creatures can't be blocked this turn. So you could use that on your own turn to make all your creatures not be able to be blocked. Really, really cool. Or, you could use it for politicking if you want to as well. All right, next one here is K9 Mark 1. So K9, really cheap, only blue, and yeah, less than $1. Negative, as long as he is untapped, other legendary creatures you control have Ward 1. So any kind of legendary deck that includes blue, he can easily go into it really well. Personally, I think that he works really well in like an artifact kind of legendary deck where you're kind of relying on your commander or you want a little bit of extra protection on your commander. But having the option here of making it so a target target legendary can't be blocked this turn is really cool, right? Like something like Rogue's Passage costs 4 to make it so something doesn't get blocked, but you can pay like 1 in a blue to make it so that someone doesn't get blocked with this. There's just so many different ways you can potentially use K9. He even works in like, you know, an actual dog deck with Sophia and stuff, or any like, you know, Sean with like the legendary creatures and tap those, and Lara Croft, I think we saw somebody using it with Lara Croft as well. Like, you know, a lot of really great decks can make use of this K9 card. All right, the next one here is the Sonic Screwdriver. Similar to Reverse the Polarity, this is an incredibly versatile card. Now, it's not as good as, say, for example, like, you know, one of the 2-mana, like a 2-mana Arcane Signet or something, but it is close, in my opinion, because it's got just different options that are all going to be useful. Pay 1 and untap a target artifact. There's lots of, like, you know, artifact-based decks that you could make a lot of use of that with. You know, tap 2 and scry 1, probably the weakest of the modes, but then tap 3, say, make something unblockable. Again, Rogue's Passage is 4 to make something unblockable. You are unfortunately giving up that mana there to make it happen, so it's realistically paying 4, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, but there's lots of different uses that you could have for the Sonic Screwdriver, right? Whether it's, you know, in an actual doctor-based deck or an artifact-based deck, you could find a lot of really great uses for this. And especially if you've got like an artifact creature as your commander or something, this could really help with that. All right, next up we've got is Decaying Time Loop. This, to me, is a very interesting one-sided wheel. You're going to discard all the cards in your hand, then you can draw that many cards. And then it's got Retrace, so you can cast it from your graveyard by discarding a land in addition to paying its other costs. So you could potentially just keep cycling through your cards. In my opinion, this is like a kind of similar, not exactly, like a Life from the Loam kind of thing, and could fulfill like a very similar purpose, exceptionally in like a cheap-ish kind of Yuma deck, where you're going to be discarding and wanting to discard all of your cards and everything to potentially get, you know, a whole bunch of deserts into the graveyard and everything like that. All right, next up we've got is Sergeant John Benton, and I think a lot of people have kind of cottoned onto him and kind of figured out that you can do some really, really crazy stuff with him. But with the fact that they've just released a group hug precon, this guy here is like the ultimate group hug, like not just a commander, like he's a really fun group hug commander, but even a group hug card, right? He is going to, whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So you are encouraging people to let you through and hit them. But then you just go and be like, buff him up a whole bunch and just smack him hard in the face. All of a sudden, you know, they're drawing 8 cards, you're drawing 8 cards, they got hit for 8 life. There's a crazy amount of different things that you can do with John. I really love the card. I think he's a very interesting card, and you could run him, yeah, in a lot of like group hug decks. You could even make him like your actual commander and run like a group hug slash like combat tricks kind of deck or something. Lots of great ways to make use of him. All right, and the next one here is Cybership, and personally, I think this is a very interesting card. Now, it is rather expensive. It does cost 6, and it does have an incredibly powerful effect to go alongside that, though, where when you deal combat damage to a player with the Cybership, you're going to put the top 2 cards of that player's library onto the battlefield face down under your control. So, first of all, this is going to be very strong in like the Deadly Disguise precon, and very strong in like, where is he? Is he here again? Where's my favorite? In Don Andreas. Don Andreas Theft. This card is bonkers, right? Because each of these cards that you're exiling off the top of those people's library is going to be a card that you control but don't own. So each of those is going to be an artifact creature, but then they're getting buffed up and they become pirates, and boom, this can get very, very heavily out of control very quickly. I really love this card. I think it's a very, very interesting card. It is, as I said, is a little bit on the expensive side because it costs 6 and stuff, and you do have to crew it and everything. But I think that it's a very interesting kind of, it's a cheap, very easy card that you can throw into a deck and kind of throw it at something. Edward Kenway. I've got my Edward Kenway deck. I think that I've added this card in it because I thought that it was just very interesting and a very cool way to kind of add in a little bit of theft into that deck. All right, the next one here is Return the Past, which I actually didn't realize was a Doctor Who exclusive card. I thought that this was just a card, right? But either way, you know, it costs 6. It gives all of your cards in your graveyard flashback. Each instance and sorcery, it gives each instance and sorcery in your graveyard flashback, and the flashback cost is just equal to its mana cost. That's it. You don't have to pay anything extra. Honestly, you know, a whole bunch of cards can go really well with this, a whole bunch of commanders and stuff. The most obvious kind of comparison to this is Past in Flames, except, you know, Past in Flames only lasts 1 turn, and that's it. Like, it lasts 1 turn, but it is cheaper, while this is like a permanent that you can get onto the battlefield and you can just leave it there. It does essentially the same thing, right? Like, each instance and sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. Each instance and sorcery in your graveyard has flashback, right? So it's very, very cool. I like it. I think it's a very interesting way to kind of have a similar effect to Past in Flames, except like permanently out there. Past in Flames is a cheap card though as well. So, you know, it's not replacing a super high cost card, but it could replace something like, you know, some kind of other card that you're using to make sure that you can get your instants and sorceries from the graveyard easier. Next is the Unearthly Child, which I think, I don't know, I've definitely got this one in my Edward Kenway deck, and I really think that people stop reading this card halfway through. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a Doctor card, a card with Doctor's Companion, or a vehicle card. That's the last bit that's very important, or a vehicle. You get to reveal from the top until you reveal a vehicle. And this should be in like Edward Kenway, right? Like, if you are wanting a deck that is based around vehicles, this is a great way for you to be able to get some vehicles into your hand. It's essentially, you know, pay 3 and then you're going to get 3 vehicles into your hand. Unless you added a Doctor's Companion into your Edward Kenway deck for whatever reason. Or a Doctor, I guess, if you have one of those. Either way, you know, it's a great way for you to be able to just go through, get a vehicle into your hand and stuff. It's not necessarily going to be a necessary, like a really important vehicle. It's not a tutor or anything like that. You're not tutoring up a vehicle and choosing which one you want, but it is a way for you to be able to get, you know, a guaranteed 3 vehicles into your hand, especially if your commander is like not like Sharkai. Right? So Sharkai and probably some of the commanders in the upcoming set, they have ways to be able to crew the vehicles. This allows you to just be able to get 3 vehicles, which you already will be able to have some pilots because of, like, you know, Shorikai and stuff. Like, you'll be able to have the pilots for them already. This just gets you the vehicles to go with it. In my opinion, a really great kind of underrated card. Maybe there's better versions of it. Who knows? I like it a lot. All right, now the last one here is Davos. A very interesting card, especially if you're going into like artifact heavy kind of decks. But, and I hope that my friend Jack John Jackson is not watching this, I actually have a better use for him, which is the he goes alongside my Abaddon deck, right? So I have an Abaddon deck which is based around dealing damage to people at my upkeep or on my turn, and like just passive damage, just passively chipping away with them with a number of different abilities and stuff. This enables that to then make use of that life loss on opponents in another way, right? Like, so not just because, hey, they're going to activate Abaddon, now all my cards have Cascade 20 or whatever. They now have the fact that they are going to then create black artifacts, creature token Daleks with menace, and then also make it so either I draw a card or they discard a card. There's just a lot of great ways that you can make use of this guy in any deck that is, you know, Grixis that's slowly chipping away at people, whether it's going to be like a Grixis Spellslinger deck, or, you know, Grixis, what else could you use this for? Grixis Spellslinger, Abaddon, as I said there. Breya works really well with it as well, especially because, you know, Breya has the fact that you can then sack them to deal damage to people. You know, there's a lot of great ways that you can use Davos that, you know, he's a 30-cent card. You know, just any kind of Grixis deck, have a look. You might be able to make use of this guy. He's really cool. He puts out creatures, he draws you cards, everything you kind of want in a card. Really great. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think. Do you agree with some of these? Do you disagree? Have a great day and goodbye.